I didn't lose my family in one big fight. There was no screaming, no broken plates, no door slammed shut. It happened quietly. So quietly that no one noticed, not even me. I remember that evening very clearly. We were sitting at the dining table. The light above us was warm. The food smelled familiar. Everything looked normal. My partner talked about work. My parents discussed bills. Someone mentioned a family event coming soon. I was there, physically, silently. At some point, a decision was made. Plans were set. Dates were chosen. And I realized something strange. No one asked me what I thought. Not because they didn't care. Not because they were angry. They just didn't think to ask. I smiled. I nodded. I stayed quiet. Because staying quiet felt easier than explaining how tired I was. That night, after everyone went to sleep, I stayed at the table alone. The dishes were clean. The room was silent. And I told myself, this is what keeping a family together looks like. I had learned this skill very early in life. Silence. When I was younger, silence was safety. If I didn't speak, arguments ended faster. If I didn't complain, people stayed calmer. If I didn't express my needs, no one felt uncomfortable. So I became good at it. Very good. I knew exactly when to stay quiet. I knew which words to swallow. I knew how to smile even when my chest felt tight. Over time, people started to rely on that version of me. The easy one, the understanding one, the one who never caused trouble. At first, it felt like love. They trusted me. They leaned on me. They expected me to understand everything. And I did. I understood when they were stressed. I understood when money was tight. I understood when tempers were short. So I stayed silent. Again, and again, and again. Every time I stayed silent, I told myself it was temporary. Just this week. Just until things get better. Just until everyone calms down. But things never really got better. They just continued. Silence slowly became my role. At family gatherings, others spoke. I listened. When problems appeared, others argued. I mediated. When emotions ran high, others exploded. I absorbed everything quietly. I told myself, this is maturity. This is sacrifice. This is love. But something strange started happening inside me. I stopped knowing what I wanted. When someone asked, "Are you okay with this?" my answer came automatically. Yes, it's fine. Whatever you think. Even when it wasn't. Even when my body felt heavy. Even when my thoughts raced at night. Even when my chest felt tight for no clear reason. I didn't know how to explain it. How do you explain pain when there is no obvious wound? From the outside, my family looked peaceful. We didn't fight. We didn't argue loudly. We didn't break apart. People often said, "You're lucky. Your family is so calm. You all get along so well." I smiled when they said that, because correcting them felt like betrayal. Inside, I was slowly disappearing. I started feeling tired all the time. Not physical tiredness, something deeper. I would sit in a room full of people and feel completely alone. I would listen to conversations and feel like a guest in my own life. Sometimes, I imagined what would happen if I suddenly said everything I felt. If I said, "I'm not okay." If I said, "This hurts." If I said, "I need something too." But the thought terrified me. What if it caused conflict? What if it disappointed them? What if it broke the family apart? So I stayed silent. Again. Silence became my contribution, my sacrifice, my identity. I didn't realize the cost at first. But silence has a price. It doesn't hurt loudly. It hurts slowly. It shows up as exhaustion, as numbness, as the strange feeling that life is passing by while you watch from the side. I started losing small things: my opinions, my preferences, my ability to say no. Then I started losing bigger things: joy, motivation, the sense that I mattered. And the most painful part? No one noticed. Because from their point of view, while everything was fine, I was still there, still smiling, still helping, still agreeing. They didn't see the weight I carried. How could they? I never showed it. That's the danger of silence. It convinces everyone, including yourself, that nothing is wrong. Until one day, you realize you don't recognize yourself anymore. And you don't remember when you started disappearing. You only know that it happened while you were trying to keep everyone else together. Silence doesn't feel dangerous at first. It feels useful. It feels like something you can control when everything else feels uncertain. After a while, people begin to expect it from you. They expect you to understand. They expect you to adapt. They expect you to stay calm when others lose their temper. And when you do, they call you mature. They say, "You're the strong one. You always know how to handle things. You never make a big deal out of nothing." I heard those words often. At first, they felt like praise. I felt proud of myself, proud that I could hold things together, proud that I could keep the peace when others couldn't. But slowly, those compliments became a cage. Because once people see you as the calm one, they stop asking how you're doing. They stop checking if you're okay. They assume you are. Silence turns into a habit, a reflex. When something bothers you, you don't react. You calculate. Is it worth the tension? Is it worth the argument? Is it worth the risk of hurting someone? Most of the time, the answer is no. So you let it go. You tell yourself, "It's not important. I can live with this. I don't want to make things complicated." And each time you do that, something inside you steps back. Just a little. I remember a conversation that stayed with me. We were talking about a decision, a small one, where to spend a holiday, nothing dramatic. Someone suggested a plan. Everyone agreed almost immediately. I felt that familiar pause inside me. I had a different idea, not better, just different. For a moment, I considered saying it out loud. I even opened my mouth. Then I stopped, because I could already see what would happen. The silence, the sighs, the subtle disappointment. So I smiled and said, "Yeah, that's fine." And everyone moved on. They didn't even notice that I had almost spoken. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of the holiday, but because of that moment. Because I realized something uncomfortable. I didn't stop speaking because I was afraid of conflict. I stopped speaking because I had trained myself to believe my voice mattered less. That realization hurt more than any argument ever could. Silence changes how people treat you, but it also changes how you see yourself. I stopped trusting my own reactions. If something hurt me, I wondered if I was just too sensitive. If I felt ignored, I told myself I was imagining it. If I felt lonely, I blamed myself for wanting too much. Over time, I became very good at minimizing my own feelings. I learned how to explain them away. They didn't mean it. They're just stressed. This isn't the right moment. There was always a reason, always an excuse. And the more reasons I found, the quieter I became. People started making decisions without me. Not out of cruelty, out of habit. They assumed I would be okay with it, because I always was. When they talked over me, I let it happen. When they interrupted me, I didn't push back. When they forgot to include me, I didn't remind them. I told myself, they have a lot on their minds. But slowly, a strange feeling settled in. I felt like a guest in my own family. Present. Helpful. Replaceable. I watched conversations happen around me, not with me. Sometimes I would look at their faces and wonder if they even noticed how quiet I had become, or if they simply preferred it this way. There were moments when I wanted to scream, not out loud, just inside. Moments when I wanted to say, I'm here. I matter too. I'm not invisible. But those words never made it out, because silence had become my language, and breaking it felt unnatural, uncomfortable, dangerous. I started noticing the physical signs, the tightness in my chest, the heavy feeling in my stomach, the way my shoulders stayed tense even when I was resting. I was tired, but sleep didn't help. I was surrounded by people, but I felt alone. And the worst part? I didn't feel like I had the right to complain. After all, nothing was wrong. There was no obvious problem, no clear villain, no dramatic crisis, just a slow erosion, a quiet disappearance. I began to wonder if this was simply how adult life worked. Maybe this was what commitment meant. Maybe this was what responsibility looked like. Giving up pieces of yourself so others could feel comfortable. I told myself, this is normal. This is what people do. But deep down, something felt off. I noticed how easily I apologized, even when I hadn't done anything wrong. I noticed how often I asked for permission instead of stating my needs. I noticed how rarely I used the word I when talking about the future. It was always we, always them, never me. I had become very good at being needed, but very bad at being known. One evening, someone joked, "You're always so easygoing. Nothing ever bothers you." Everyone laughed. I laughed too, but inside I felt something crack. Because that wasn't true. Things bothered me. They had always bothered me. I just learned how to hide it. That night, I sat alone in my room and tried to remember the last time I spoke honestly. Not carefully, not politely, honestly. I couldn't remember. And that scared me. Silence had protected the family, at least on the surface. There were fewer arguments, less tension, more peace. But the peace felt fragile, artificial, like something that depended entirely on me staying quiet. I began to understand something important. The family wasn't together because we understood each other. It was together because I carried the weight. And carrying that weight alone was slowly breaking me. I didn't know yet what I was going to do. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have the courage. All I knew was this. Silence was no longer neutral. It wasn't just a choice. It was a cost. And I was the one paying it, every single day. There is a special kind of loneliness that only exists inside a family. It doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being surrounded and still feeling unseen. That was when it started. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just a quiet shift. I began to notice how conversations flowed without ever stopping at me. They talked about plans, about worries, about decisions. I listened. Sometimes I nodded. Sometimes I smiled. But no one waited for my response. It wasn't intentional. That's what made it harder. No one was pushing me away. They simply didn't reach for me anymore. I was there, but not included. At first, I thought it was my fault. Maybe I had become boring. Maybe I didn't speak up enough. Maybe I had trained them to ignore me. That thought hurt, but it also felt familiar. Blaming myself was easier than questioning the family. I told myself, this is what happens when you grow up. People get busy. Not everything is about you. So I stayed quiet. Again. But the silence felt different now. Heavier. Like it was pressing against my chest instead of protecting me. I noticed it most during ordinary moments. Sitting on the couch together, each of us looking at a different screen. Eating meals where everyone talked, but no one really listened. Sharing the same space without sharing anything real. Sometimes I would say something small, a comment, an opinion, a thought, and it would disappear into the room like smoke. No response, no reaction. The conversation would simply move on. Each time that happened, a small part of me shut down. I stopped trying. I learned how to fade without physically leaving. I learned how to be present without being involved. I learned how to disappear while still fulfilling my role. The strange thing was, no one complained. In fact, things seemed smoother, fewer disagreements, less tension. The family functioned well, and that terrified me, because it meant my silence was not only accepted, it was preferred. I started feeling like a background object, useful, reliable, invisible, someone who cleaned up, someone who listened, someone who adjusted, but not someone whose inner world mattered. At night, when everything was quiet, my thoughts became loud. I replayed moments from the day, trying to understand where I went wrong. Why didn't I speak? Why didn't I insist? Why did I always retreat? I asked myself questions no one else ever asked me. How are you really? What do you need? What are you afraid of? The answers scared me, because I realized I didn't feel safe being honest. Not because anyone threatened me. See, but because honesty felt like a disruption, like something that would break the fragile balance. I didn't want to be the reason things became uncomfortable, so I carried my discomfort alone. I started feeling tired in a way rest couldn't fix. I could sleep for hours and still wake up exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. Every interaction felt like work. Every smile felt practiced. Every agreement felt like a compromise I never fully consented to. I noticed how easily I said yes. Yes to plans I didn't want. Yes to decisions I didn't agree with. Yes to responsibilities that weren't mine. Saying no felt dangerous, not because of anger, but because of disappointment. I was afraid of being seen as difficult, as selfish, as someone who caused problems. So I stayed the safe one, the quiet one, the one who didn't need much. Over time, that image became my prison. People stopped checking on me. They assumed I was fine. Why wouldn't they? I never said otherwise. When I looked upset, someone would say, "You're just tired." And I would agree, because explaining felt impossible. How do you explain that you feel alone in a room full of people? How do you explain that nothing is wrong, yet everything hurts? I began to feel disconnected from my own emotions. Sometimes I felt nothing at all, just a dull numbness. Other times, small things overwhelmed me. A careless comment, a joke that went too far, a moment of being ignored. I would retreat inward, shut down, and tell myself to calm down. Don't overreact. Don't make this bigger than it is. But the feelings didn't disappear. They accumulated, layer by layer. Silence doesn't release pressure. It stores it. I started avoiding eye contact, avoiding conversations, avoiding moments where I might be asked how I was doing, because I didn't trust myself to answer honestly. I wasn't sure what would come out. Anger, sadness, resentment. All of it felt dangerous, so I kept everything inside. And inside, it became crowded. I remember one moment clearly. We were all in the same room, talking, laughing, and suddenly, I felt like I wasn't there at all, like I was watching a scene from someone else's life. I looked at their faces and wondered if they would notice if I stood up and left. That thought shocked me, not because I wanted to leave, but because I wasn't sure they would miss me. That realization hurt more than any argument ever could. I didn't want attention. I didn't want control. I just wanted to be seen, to be considered, to be asked, "What do you think?" But silence had erased that possibility. Because when you don't speak, people stop listening. And when people stop listening, you begin to doubt your own existence within the relationship. I felt invisible, not ignored, not rejected, just unnecessary. And that was when I understood something painful. I wasn't lonely because my family didn't love me. I was lonely because I had slowly removed myself to make loving me easier. I had made myself small, convenient, predictable. And now, there was no space left for who I really was. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and felt something shift, a quiet realization. If I continued like this, I wouldn't disappear suddenly. I would fade completely, and no one would know when it happened. That thought stayed with me, not as fear, as truth. And once you see that truth, you can't ignore it anymore. After that night, nothing exploded. That was the strange part. There was no shouting, no dramatic confrontation, no clear ending, just silence. A heavier kind of silence than before. We still ate dinner together, still talked about groceries, still discussed bills and school schedules. From the outside, we probably looked fine, but something had shifted. I felt it in the way she avoided my eyes, in how her phone never left her hand, in how conversations ended too quickly. I told myself, this is normal. Families go through phases. Not everything needs to be discussed. That was the lie I repeated every day. Silence started to feel like a job, something I had to maintain carefully. I learned which topics to avoid. So I learned when to nod, when to change the subject, when to pretend not to notice. And the more I stayed silent, the more everyone else relaxed. The kids laughed more. The house felt calmer. The tension disappeared, at least on the surface. People praised me for being patient, for being mature, for holding the family together. They had no idea what that patience was costing me. At night, when the house finally slept, my mind refused to rest. Questions circled endlessly. Was I protecting my family? Or just protecting an illusion? Was I being strong? Or simply afraid of the truth? I stopped trusting my own instincts. Every doubt felt selfish. Every question felt like betrayal. So I swallowed them. I swallowed my anger, my sadness, my fear. And slowly, I stopped recognizing myself. I became quieter, more careful, less present. I was physically there, but emotionally somewhere else. Even my body started reacting. Headaches, tight chest, sleepless nights. Doctors found nothing wrong. They told me to reduce stress. I almost laughed. How do you reduce stress when silence is the source of it? One evening, my child asked a simple question. Why don't you smile like before? I didn't know how to answer, because the truth was too heavy, too complicated, too adult. So I smiled and said nothing. That moment stayed with me. I realized something terrifying. My silence wasn't just protecting the family. It was teaching them that emotions should be hidden, that discomfort should be ignored, that love means enduring pain quietly. That's not what I wanted to pass on, but I still didn't speak, because speaking meant consequences. So speaking meant choosing uncertainty, possibly breaking everything I had tried so hard to preserve. So I stayed silent again. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and the silence didn't heal anything. It only spread. It filled every room, every conversation, every shared moment. Even joy felt muted. Laughter felt rehearsed. Affection felt cautious. I began to understand something painful. Staying silent doesn't freeze time. It slowly reshapes everything underneath. Relationships don't stay the same when truth is missing. They adapt, they harden, they hollow out. One night, I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I barely recognized the person staring back. Older, tired, disconnected. I asked myself quietly, how long can I keep doing this? There was no answer, only silence. And for the first time, that silence felt unbearable. Not because it was loud, but because it was endless. Something inside me began to shift. A small realization, but powerful. Silence might keep things together, but it doesn't keep them alive. And I wasn't sure how much longer I could survive inside a family held together by everything left unsaid. The next morning, nothing had changed. The house was quiet, breakfast was routine, schedules were followed, and yet everything felt different. Not because someone spoke, but because something inside me had crossed a line. I realized I was no longer tired. I was empty. Silence had drained me slowly, so quietly, that I hadn't noticed until there was almost nothing left. I watched my family move around the house. Familiar faces, familiar voices, people I loved, and suddenly a painful truth surfaced. Well, I had been protecting everyone except myself. I had sacrificed my voice so others could feel comfortable. I had absorbed discomfort so peace could exist on the surface, and in doing so, I had disappeared. That realization didn't bring anger. It brought sadness, a deep, heavy sadness, because I understood now that silence is not neutral. It always chooses a side, and it had chosen against me. For days, I rehearsed conversations in my head. Not arguments, not accusations, just honesty, simple sentences, calm words. But every time I imagined speaking, fear followed. Fear of reactions, fear of change, fear of consequences I couldn't control. Silence had become familiar, predictable, painful but predictable. Speaking meant stepping into the unknown, and yet I was already losing myself in the known. One evening, when the house was quiet again, I sat alone in the living room. No distractions, no noise, just me and my thoughts. I asked myself a question I had avoided for years. What am I teaching my family by staying silent? The answer was clear. I was teaching them that love requires self-erasure, that harmony is more important than truth, that discomfort should be buried. That realization hurt more than any argument ever could. I finally understood something essential. Families don't fall apart because someone speaks. They fall apart because no one does. Silence doesn't prevent damage. It delays it. It spreads it. It makes it harder to heal. That night, I didn't confront anyone. I didn't make speeches. I didn't demand change. But I made a decision. I decided I would no longer disappear. The next day, I started small. See, I expressed discomfort without blame. I shared feelings without accusations. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. And it felt terrifying, not because of how others reacted, but because I had forgotten what it felt like to exist fully. Some conversations were awkward, some were painful, some led nowhere, but something unexpected happened. I began to feel present again, not lighter, not happier, but real, and that mattered. I learned something important through this process. Speaking doesn't guarantee understanding. It doesn't guarantee resolution. It doesn't guarantee that things will stay together. But silence guarantees something else. It guarantees that you will carry everything alone. I stopped believing that my suffering was the glue holding my family together. Love is not proven by how much pain you endure quietly. Love is tested by how honestly you show up. Some things changed, some didn't. Not every story ends neatly. But I stopped breaking myself to maintain an image of peace. And that was the real turning point. Looking back, I don't regret trying to protect my family. I regret believing that silence was the only way to do it. If you are listening to this and you feel trapped in quiet endurance, ask yourself gently, is your silence keeping things together or slowly breaking you? Because no family is healed by losing one of its voices. If this story resonated with you, if it felt familiar, you're not alone. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay with us. There are more stories, more quiet truths, and more moments like this waiting to be told.